kid yet again. He's there, in perfectly good health, living with an elderly Nord named Froki. Speak to either of the two, and they'll explain that Haming did sadly lose both of his parents to Alduin. However, the boy himself somehow made it out of there. And Froki, apparently being his grandfather, took him in, and is now raising the kid. Haming, for his part, seems shockingly well put together for someone who literally just watched his hometown be devoured by a weird monster, and he's doing well. Though, the young man does admit to being quite bored under Froki's supervision.
It ain't so bad. I miss living with my parents back in Helgen, though. Froki can't cook, and there's nobody to talk to up here.
But no matter, at the end of the day it's nice to know that Helgen's smallest citizen got out of the chaos, seemingly okay. Let's just hope he has a bright future ahead of him. Next on our list, our experience escaping from this burning settlement in the midst of Alduin's tantrum offers us one of our first real choices in Skyrim. Do we flee the chaos with Ralof, a fellow escaped prisoner and member of the Stormcloak Rebellion, or with Hadvar, a sympathetic Imperial soldier who seems willing to overlook our criminal past for an extra ally? Early in the game, it can be a tough decision, and it's one we'll have to make quickly. Whomever we choose, we'll spend quite a while navigating this town's dungeon with, and we'll get to know quite well. However, did you know that Bethesda had designed a version of this quest where Ulfric Stormcloak would have accompanied you on the escape, had you sided with Ralof? Yes, the High King, or convicted criminal depending on who you ask, Ulfric was supposed to have joined the two of you through the various tunnels and caves as you and Ralof fought and navigated your way to safety. He would have provided unique, fully voiced lines, talking about his disdain for the Empire and desire to see a free Skyrim throughout the journey, and of course would have assisted you in combat.
We'll meet again in Sovngarde, brother.
This is it, eh? Nobody else made it.
No, my lord. At least not this way. Maybe some of them found another way out.
I don't know where that dragon came from. But without it, we'd all be a foot shorter and a lot less talkative.
There's no evidence the Imperial Hadvar would have been joined by anyone else, say General Tullius for instance, to balance things out, unfortunately. Given it seems Bethesda had all of the voice work and AI packages already developed, it appears the only reason they cut Ulfric out of this part of the quest was to prevent us from becoming too fond of the Stormcloaks too early. I mean, if their very leader helped us escape, and the Imperials didn't offer the same, it might corrupt our judgment a bit when picking a side in the Civil War. Furthermore, it wasn't just Ulfric that saw some changes by the developers. Lokir, the cowardly, frightened horse thief, was originally casted with a different voice actor, and given much more aggressive lines, where he sounds less like a nervous wreck and more like an arrogant jerk. Take a listen to some.
What's wrong with him, huh?
Watch your tongue. You're speaking to Ulfric Stormcloak, the true High King.
Ulfric? The Jarl of Windhelm? You're the leader of the rebellion. But if they've captured you... Oh gods, where are they taking us?
Wait, who's that gagged fellow in the cart? He looks familiar.
Watch your tongue. You're speaking to Ulfric Stormcloak, the true High King.
That's the man who used the voice to murder High King Torrig, the leader of the rebellion? Hey, you! Ulfric! You traitor! You're the reason we're here!
At least Sovngarde will be waiting for us. Our ancestors. Feasting. Mead.
Gods, what I wouldn't give for some mead right now.
Bethesda appears to have done a lot of experimenting with this mission before they finally settled on a version. And it makes sense. This is our first introduction to Skyrim after all, and first impressions mean a lot. Overall, while I would have liked to see a more confident Lokir and be joined for my escape with Ulfric, I can see why they made the adjustments they did. Coming in at number 3, more citizens likely escaped Helgen than we thought. Let me explain. Just west of the city itself, players can find an unfortunate unmarked location. 2 dead Nords lie before a small, makeshift encampment in the company of a single wolf. Clearly, the poor individuals must have been mauled to death. A sad fate they suffered. But what does this have to do with Helgen citizens? How do we know these people were escapees from the tragedy? Surely they could just be ordinary campers, or maybe nomads, right? Well, funnily enough, this entire campsite, including the couple of bodies as well as the wolf, will not spawn in the game until the player has completed the quest Dragon Rising early in the storyline, and saved Whiterun from Mirkwood. Yeah, that's right. If you visit this exact same spot before having completed that mission, nothing will be here. Just some snow and ground. This suggests the dead Nords were indeed Helgen refugees. I mean, think about it. If these people's corpses were spawned in from the very beginning of the game, and we could see them as soon as we left the burning city, it wouldn't make much sense. No way people fled the town, set up a campsite, and then got wolfed in such a short amount of time. Furthermore, if I haven't already convinced you, well, here's the kicker. Their names are actually refugees. Yeah, that's the literal names of the dead characters. I think that pretty much seals it. This location is one of the only in the game that behaves in the fashion that it does, waiting to spawn in until the completion of a quest. It's neat Bethesda went so far to give us the impression that even after the fires burned down Helgen, there were a few survivors after all, who had to go on after losing so much. Disappointingly though for these souls, even after having lost everything, it seems their fate was still a dark one after all. For a fourth spot, did you know that if you make it out of Helgen quick, like really fast, and book it for Haafingar, it's actually possible to bump into General Tullius, or even Thalmor emissary Elenwen on the road, both on their way back from Helgen to Solitude's Castle Dower and the Thalmor Embassy respectively. Sadly, if caught in the middle of their journey, neither character will boast much unique dialogue. General Tullius will simply try to recruit you into the Imperial Legion as he normally does, and humorously tell you to go speak to Legate Rika, and Elenwen will respond to interactions with the same one-liners she uses at the Thalmor Embassy.
I trust this is something... Speak with Legate Rika. She will determine if you are Legion material.
The Empire, in its wisdom, has come to recognize Talos worship as a barbaric remnant of a bygone age.
It's quite funny, though, that these characters don't actually just teleport to their destinations, but in fact physically make the journey themselves. What Bethesda often does in situations like this is rather than teleport characters from one location to another, they'll simply despawn that character and spawn in a totally new version of the same NPC at a given destination. But it looks like they didn't even bother to do that here either. So, as a result, if you move as fast as possible, you can make the journey from Helgen to Solitude in the company of some of Tamriel's most prominent citizens. And finally, last on our list, in the final version of the game, as you're just being wheeled into the city on that prison cart, Ralof, a fellow prisoner, will briefly reminisce about Helgen, having evidently spent a portion of his childhood here, claiming to have once been sweet on a girl from town. And notably, he wonders if Vilod is still making that mead with juniper berries.
This is Helgen. I used to be sweet on a girl from here. Wonder if Vilod is still making that mead with juniper berries mixed in.
It's a passing statement, and chances are few people pay much attention to something remarked so casually when they're on their way to literally be beheaded to death. However, long after you've gotten away from the city and the dust has settled, if you decide to return to Helgen, players can find something very interesting. In one of the burnt-out, ruined buildings, just next to the southeastern tower on the second floor, bottles can be found. Various bottles of, you guessed it, mead with juniper berries. Yep, apparently the stuff is real and is in the game. I guess Vilod really was still making it after all. There will be a small handful of bottles of this stuff, and the place is literally the only location in the game it spawns. Though, looted bottles will respawn after a few days. Mead with juniper berries also comes with ever so much stronger stats than the normal stuff. Typical Nord mead restores 15 points of stamina, but slows stamina regeneration by 30% for 30 seconds. Mead with juniper berries, on the other hand, restores 20 points of stamina, but slows regeneration by 30% for 40 seconds. so its effects are ever so slightly amplified. Oh well, a big thank you to Vlad. While his life may have been lost at Helgen, his memory shall live on through his oh-so-sweet beverages. And with that, we are going to wrap up. 5 things you may have missed about the iconic city of Helgen in The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Which of these curious details and/or Easter eggs did you find to be the most notable? And what interesting facts about this settlement, or really any other locations in Skyrim, do you know of that I've yet to cover? Leave a comment down below. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone! Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Nate here. And the City of Solitude is arguably among the most important in Tamriel. One of the wealthiest settlements outside of Cyrodiil, Solitude sits as the capital of not just the Hothingar Hold, but indeed the capital of all of Skyrim as well. At least, as far as the Empire is concerned. It serves as the home and the administrative center of both General Tullius and Jarl Elisif the Fair, whom the Empire insists is Skyrim's rightful High Queen. Throughout the game, the location occupies an important role in many plot lines, from that of the Thieves Guild to the Civil War, and you'll be hard-pressed to find a Dragonborn who hasn't set foot beyond this palace's gates hundreds of times. However, despite being such a prominent settlement in what is now an ancient game, there's quite a bit about this iconic jewel many players likely never knew. So today we'll be breaking down some of the most interesting examples, as we take a look at 5 things you probably didn't know about the City of Solitude in The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Starting off, as we already mentioned, Solitude is officially ruled by its Jarl, Elisif the Fair. A fairly young and rather inexperienced woman, Elisif never in her life expected to reign alone. However, after the death of her husband, the previous Jarl and High King, a man named Torrig, who was killed in combat by Ulfric Stormcloak, she was forced to take up the throne. Throughout the game, she's portrayed as very well-meaning, but not necessarily skilled in leadership. And it's heavily suggested that, for all intents and purposes, General Tullius is the man who wields the actual power. That said, something unique about Elisif is that she's the only Jarl in the game that will not, under any circumstances, be replaced during the Civil War. Even if the player sides with the Stormcloaks and captures the city, Elisif, rather than being sentenced to death or exile, will in fact be spared by Ulfric, and allowed to retain her position as the Jarl of Solitude. Though she'll also have to renounce her claims to the title of High Queen. It's a nice gesture by the Stormcloak, who always saw Elisif as little more than an unwilling puppet. But did you know, despite her being essential throughout the game and eventually being spared, Bethesda had originally designed a quest where Elisif was supposed to die. You see, there's a scrapped quest we can find in the game's files, called Boethiah's Bidding. As various voice files and AI packages reveal, that mission was supposed to serve as the Daedric goddess Boethiah, Lord of Deceit and Conspiracy's personal quest. And in it, she would send the player to gain the trust of Elisif and become her personal bodyguard, only to assassinate her as soon as she let her own guard down. After her assassination, Boethiah would name the Dovahkiin her new champion, and in Elisif's place, a Thane of Solitude's court by the name of Erikr would become the new Jarl and imperial candidate for Skyrim's ruler. Of course, this mission never actually found its way into the completed version of the game, and instead, Boethiah's Daedric quest we get to play sends us to go kill a bunch of random bandits or something, in a far less grand fashion. But, make no mistake, Bethesda didn't scrap this quest because they ran out of time or resources or anything. They fully voiced hundreds of lines of dialogue, and completed seemingly all of the scripts they needed to. The quest was done. It was just never added in. In fact, modders have quite easily pieced it back together, and reintroduced the Boethiah's Bidding mission as a mod on the Nexus, and it plays seamlessly.
First Torrig and now Elisif. Damn those Stormcloaks. Let's hope that Erikr fares better than they did.
We're backing Erikr. When the moot meets, they'll do the sensible thing.
My own suspicion is that the reason Bethesda decided to scrap Elisif's death was so as to not complicate Skyrim's Civil War any further. I mean, if she died and Erikr took the throne, the Jarls of Skyrim who still supported the Empire would very likely begin to waver. Erikr, in contrast to Elisif, is regarded as an extremely smart man, but he's an evil one. Even as a Thane in Solitude's court, he brags about playing both sides of the civil war against each other for profit. And we know he has extensive ties to the Thieves Guild and Maven Blackbriar. In short, nobody likes him. So it makes some sense that Bethesda decided his ascension to office just didn't make a whole lot of narrative sense for Imperial players. And thus, Elisif the Fair became Elisif the Invincible. Next on our list, Solitude doesn't only occupy a pivotal role in Skyrim's civil war, but also the setting of some of the Dark Brotherhood questline's most defining moments. It's here we assassinate the very cousin of the Emperor herself, Vittoria Vici, on her wedding day. It's also where we first try to kill the Emperor himself later on in the questline, when he visits to pay his respects to said dead cousin, only to discover that it's a decoy visiting. But players who are both fighting for the Stormcloaks and members of the Brotherhood can find themselves in an interesting conundrum. At the climax of the Stormcloak questline, we of course must lay siege to the City of Solitude and capture it in an unforgettable battle. But what happens if, while you're laying siege to Solitude, you get one of those Dark Brotherhood quests that sends you to kill someone in Solitude? What if, while the city is burning and being attacked, you're also told to kill Vittoria Vici at her wedding? How does that work? And what's the vice versa? Well, fascinatingly, Bethesda seems to have already realized the potential conflicts here, and have developed a pretty simple, yet neat solution. If Solitude is under siege by the time you work your way up to one of the Dark Brotherhood's assassinations that's supposed to take place there, rather than give you the appropriate quest, Astrid will instead scold the Dovahkiin, and demand you sort out the nonsense before proceeding with some unique dialogue. Take a listen.
You're responsible for the Siege of Solitude. By Sithis, this undermines all our plans. Fool! Finish that mess, and only then will we speak.
By contrast, if you've already accepted a contract that takes place in Solitude, and work your way up with the Stormcloaks to the point the faction is ready to lay siege to the city, Ulfric will announce he can't proceed until the Brotherhood's finished up its work.
We're ready to march on Solitude, but the Emperor's cousin is getting married. If royal blood was spilled, all of Cyrodiil would be up in arms. We can't afford an all-out war with the Empire, so we'll bide our time for now. We're ready to march on Solitude, but the Emperor's visiting. The goddamn Emperor! And as much as I like to kill the man myself, we can't risk an all-out war with the Empire. We'll bide our time for now.
And so, thanks to some very simple conversation trees created by Bethesda, there shall never be a Stormcloak siege at the same time as a high-profile contract in Solitude. I personally like the solution, even if I would have liked crashing the wedding with an army of Stormcloak soldiers even more. Coming in at number 3, royal courts are always places of intrigue and curious happenings, and that of Solitude's is no exception. Fulk Firebeard and Bryleen are two of the Hold's Thanes. They advise the Jarl on various political and economic matters, and are both at odds with that Erikr fellow we talked about earlier. They know he's up to no good, and has little loyalty to any entity but his own coin purse. However, both characters have been hesitant to act, seemingly afraid Erikr might be able to retaliate in some capacity. But how? What's he gonna do, hire assassins? Well, curious players who aren't afraid to get a little nosy can figure out just what's keeping Mr. Firebeard and Bryleen so cautious. The two are secret lovebirds, and if said secret were to be revealed, they risk losing their position in the court. There's no real quests or missions associated with this secret. It's something we can only uncover via some clever stalking. Should the player sneak into Bryleen's home at night, it's possible for Fulk Firebeard to show up after hours, and the two may have the following quite significant conversation. Take a listen.
Fulk, you shouldn't have come. You know what happened if people would find out about us.
I know, my lady. I just needed to see you outside the court, away from all of the politics.
I'm serious. If Erikr knew about us, He'd force you to resign from your position. And without you, he'd have the Jarl bent around his little finger.
You're right, of course. But when this war is over, I'll gladly resign and we can stop sneaking around like this.
One more reason to pray for the fighting to end, then, my love.
Furthermore, some general dialogue within the palace confirms all too well the romantic secret, and it seems not everyone in the city is quite as oblivious as Bryling and Falk would hope.
It's nearly time to collect taxes on your properties here in the city, Bryling.
Is it that time again already? Very well. Let's meet this evening and make the arrangements.
Oh, well done. Very subtle.
I beg your pardon?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I imply that you'd be meeting for purposes other than court business? You must forgive me.
Hold your tongue, wizard, or you're likely to lose it.
I should very much like to see you try it, my dear steward.
Stop it, both of you. You're acting like children.
And so, these two clearly good-intentioned Thanes have to keep their love well-veiled, and can't maneuver against the Blue Palace's less savory influences, lest their passion be exposed, and both be out of a job. Let's just hope the Civil War comes to a conclusion quickly, and these two will finally be able to celebrate their passion, free from persecution. For our fourth spot, while we're still in the Blue Palace, we might as well talk about the Pelagius Wing. The Pelagius Wing is an abandoned section of the building that hasn't been entered by anyone for hundreds of years. It's named after Pelagius, a former High King of Skyrim that was absolutely insane. It's said the reason nobody likes to enter this wing of the building is that they believe Pelagius still in some capacity possesses it. During the quest, the Mind of Madness will be sent in here, and it acts as a portal to Sheogorath's Plane of Oblivion, which is interesting. However, there's one really interesting detail about this wing of the building that I really want to share. When viewing the Blue Palace from the outside, you'll notice that most of the building is quite clean and, well, frankly, normal looking. However, when you look at the outside of the building where the Pelagius Wing should be, you'll notice that it's growing moss, various weeds, and overall just seems under-maintained, even from the exterior. Without even entering the structure or knowing what it is, you can already tell that part of this building just isn't being taken care of. It's not necessarily a game-changing fact like the death of Jarl Elisif, but it's one of those really small, loving details by Bethesda that I think helps to make Skyrim so great. And finally, last on our list, Captain Aldous is the commander of the guard in Solitude. When we first enter the city, we'll watch as he reads Rogvir his last rites, before the execution. For the most part, Aldous seems to be a fairly good and competent man. While his loyalty is to the Empire, he does seem to understand the Stormcloak cause at least a little, and seems to be one of the few citizens that understands why Rogvir must be executed, but at the same time doesn't take a whole lot of joy in it either. On top of his responsibilities to the City Watch, he also trains some of the Imperial Legion's newest recruits. So this guy's quite the military man. However, his temperate and reasonable persona will completely disappear if the Dragonborn approaches this character while wearing Stormcloak armor. As if you do so, rather than engage in his normal dialogue tree, Aldous will instead berate the player, demanding to know why you're dressed like a quote-unquote damn traitor.
What do you think you're doing, walking around dressed like a damn Stormcloak traitor?
From there, you'll have two options in how to proceed. You can A, state that you didn't mean anything by it and firmly apologize, promising that you're not loyal to the Stormcloaks, or you can B, own it, and say you support Ulfric. So what? If you go with that second option, you'll immediately incur a 40 gold bounty in the hold of Hoffingar, and he, as well as any nearby guards, will turn hostile and attack.
Is that right? Here's how the Legion deals with rebel scum like you.
Aldous is one of the few characters in the game that dynamically responds to the player's attire choices like this. Not even General Tullius or Legate Ricka seem to get the least bit offended if you approach them wearing the armor of Ulfric's boys. But for whatever reason, Aldous takes that quite personally. Oh, yeah, and he also may or may not be conspiring to overthrow the Jarl of Morthal. But more on that in a future video.